Cool. That recording. Sorry, I haven't used the Zoom record before. Oh, okay, cool. Now it's recording. Um, Roman, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your background first?
Sure thing. So my name is Roman Yampolskiy. I'm tenured associate professor at University of Louisville. It's a computer science and engineering department. I just celebrated 15 years there. So last maybe 5 or so, I've been doing AI safety work full time, mostly theoretical work. I'm not making systems which are more capable, trying to figure out what we can do to make them safer.
Cool.
Published a bunch, have another book coming out, hopefully early January, again on the same topic. So yeah.
Nice. Cool. So you said you have a book coming out. What is the book titled? And can you tell us more about your specific kind of focus on that book? Is it about the impossibility results?
Good guess. Yeah, the last couple of years all been about trying to understand what can be achieved in this space and what are the ultimate limits. And so the book is kind of compilation of all these different impossibility results, limits to understanding how the systems work, predicting their behavior, control, and a few other less famous ones.
Cool. And you said you're at the University of Louisville. Are there any other people there who are kind of interested in alignment and similar topics, or is it mostly just you?
It is mostly just me. It's a very conservative engineering school. They do kind of standard vanilla type engineering work, computer science work. They're not crazy like me.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So yeah, I was listening to the Future of Life podcast, and it sounds like you think that alignment is an extremely difficult problem before we even come to the impossibility results, if I was following you correctly. Any chance you could comment on that?
Sure. So if you start trying to formalize the idea, what is it you're actually trying to accomplish? Whose values are you aligning with? What are those values? Are they static, dynamic? How would, let's say, you somehow got 8 billion agents to agree on something, which is somewhat difficult? How would you program those concepts, which are inherently very fuzzy and ill-defined, into a specific programming language? So at any level, if you zoom in, you just get more impossibility results. It's easy to talk about it in kind of fuzzy terms. We'll make a good system, it will be beneficial, but then you try to formalize those ideas, you quickly realize none of it is specific enough to actually debug and test and make sure it matches your requirements.
Cool. Okay, so why don't we start off with whichever impossibility result you think is the most important, so you think is most problematic for alignment.
Oh, that's a good question. So there is the way I try to present it is there is a toolbox. If you say you want to control, if you want to control a super intelligent system, advanced AI system, you need certain tools. You need to be able to understand how the system works. So that's the explainability, mechanistic interpretability now is the new term. You need to be able to predict what decisions the system is likely to make given certain environment, set of inputs, and then you can have different levels of control. Once you have all these tools, what do you mean by control? Do you mean like direct orders? It's going to do exactly what you say? Is it more like it's trying to figure out what you meant? Is it completely ignoring you and just says, I know better, I'm super intelligent, I'll take you to the gym right now, that's what you need. So depending on how you define it and what tools you have, it becomes harder and harder to get to that level. And for each one of those tools, I have a separate paper which basically says, yeah, you can get some information out of it. So let's say explainability. Yeah, we can look at visual neurons and, okay, this neuron triggers every time we have picture of a face. But it's not obvious that we can scale it all the way to systems which are both more complex, bigger than human brain, have more working memory. Think of it this way. So for college admissions, we kind of test people to see, okay, are you smart enough or not to be at MIT or Harvard? We know that some people will not do well in an advanced quantum physics course, for example. So we understand there are limits to capabilities of some people, but it's true for all people. For all of us, there is kind of upper limit of what we can understand. And it'd be really weird if it was not the case with much more complex systems that you can comprehend it at any level, no matter how big it got, no matter how many components it had. Yeah, you can zoom in and see, okay, I think this set of nodes, this set of neurons are somehow connected to this decision, but it doesn't mean you have the whole picture about the system. And basically in a paper, I kind of try to formalize some of those notions, reduce it to compression, lossy compression, perfect compression, and show that there are limits to how much you can explain something. The perfect explanation is the model itself. So if I give you a model with all the weights, you have exactly complete explanation for how decisions are made, but it doesn't really help you to comprehend it. You still have no idea how it works. If I start simplifying it, now we're losing some valuable information. Maybe it relies on 10,000 factors to make a decision. I'm going to give you top 10. Like, this is what's really important, but you're ignoring a lot of it. And it may not be a big deal in some contexts, but if you're trying to make sure that it's safe in all situations, that could be problematic. And so that's problems with explainability, with predictability. You can look at simple proof. If you knew what a smarter system would do, you would be that smart. Easy to see it in chess, right? If you're playing a game of chess, if you can accurately predict every move, the assumption that the system is smarter than you is not going to hold. Again, it's best to kind of read those. I think at this point we at like 50 different impossibility results. We just had a ACM surveys paper published on it. Some of those we just presented without tying it into the safety work. So if anyone's interested in picking one up and seeing how it limits our options, always happy to see that.
Cool. So I think one of the, well, the standard way that people are trying to get around that kind of stuff is some kind of like scalable kind of oversight, things like, iterated distillation and amplification, or perhaps things like recursive reward modeling. Why do you think that these techniques are going to fail?
So I think if you look at kind of history of thinking in that direction, it goes back to Stuart Armstrong's paper on chaining God, where you just have progressively more complex systems and you can convince and verify a system 2 IQ points above you does the same, and you got this very long chain all the way to super intelligence. It doesn't seem that increasing complexity of the system is likely to increase safety or security. Typically, in any other software development project, it just creates more opportunities for bugs, for misalignment. So it may work at low levels below human capability and below generality, but I'm not so sure it's going to scale in that way. And again, I'm always happy to be proven wrong if someone can find the loophole and kind of like, no, this will scale because, but so far, I don't think anyone makes a claim that their safety mechanism will scale to superintelligence. It's kind of like putting lipstick on a shoggoth, right? Like we're making it friendly enough, it's 84% aligned, but now it's 1,000 times more capable. So in overall numbers, it's less safe, but as a percentage, it looks really good.
Cool. I think you were saying on the FOI podcast that direct control is not what we want. Could you explain that?
So direct control is what we kind of see with genie stories, right? You give a specific order. I want a hot girl, not a girl with a fever, but a good-looking girl. So there is some room. If it doesn't have common sense, it's easy to misinterpret your orders.
Okay,
and I
cool.
think most people agree direct control will create problems. I don't think it's very controversial to say that's not what we have in mind. That's where you need alignment, where the system's values are kind of matching up to what you actually intend to get.
I think you also had an example which I quite liked about, a car on a highway and telling it to stop. Did you want to go over that one?
Sure. So in the paper on control, I don't know if you shared it. I think you shared a summary of that paper. It's a little on the longer side. I present 4 different types of control. And so if I remember it now, direct control would be you on a highway, you're driving this self-driving car, and you tell it to stop. It immediately just slams the brakes. You're in the middle of a highway. There are cars flying around you, but it did exactly what you told it to do. The kind of somewhat aligned, there is 2 like medium mixed hybrid states where you give it instructions. Well, why don't you stop? The system realizes you need to use the restroom, so it pulls over. Okay, a little better. The delegated control is where you have this ideal advisor. You say, take me to the donut shop, and says, I'll take you to the gym. That's what you really need, so I'll decide for you.
Cool. So I get why direct control doesn't work, and you think that the delegated controls aren't going to work because you aren't going to be able to understand them because they're going to be like too complex, like as you're
You
saying.
won't be happy with it. Like if somebody essentially treated you like as a 2-year-old, yeah, you're probably safer, but like, is that the life we want? Do we want to be just subject to decisions of that system? Tomorrow it may decide that life is not worth it. Maybe suffering is too much. Lots of kind of extreme philosophical ways it can interpret our existence as not what we want.
Yeah, I also was reading the paper on one of the articles you linked, and you were talking, so not the paper, the I was reading one of the articles you linked, which was talking about like the paradox of telling a system to do something along the lines of don't do what I tell you to, or something like that. Could you explain why you think that this impossibility result is relevant to alignment and isn't some kind of edge case that doesn't ultimately matter?
It's not relevant to alignment. That's specifically for direct orders, and it's kind
Oh,
of inspired by mathematical self-contradiction, self-referential sentences where you basically cannot properly parse it. So that's why direct control is in general not going to work. Anytime you have this self-referential order, it's going to fail to properly execute. It doesn't imply that control is impossible based on that example.
okay. But you do think that that is problematic for direct control? Like if we focus specifically on direct control?
It is, but again, I don't think there is an argument that we should go with direct control or it's going to be safe and secure for us. So it's more of the, mathematical formalization of intuitions most people already have.
Um, yeah, yes. So I'm just going to try and understand this one more time. I guess what I'm trying to understand is why it's a non-trivial case for direct control. Like I think a lot of people could say, okay, sure, I can't always have a system doing what I tell it to do if I give it a paradoxical order. But a lot of people might go, well, that's a failure on my part, and they might not be too concerned about it. They might be fine with the system, having a bug if they kind of mess up. What would you say to that?
So in mathematics, the example was we have proofs, incompleteness proofs, thanks to Gödel, saying, okay, there are certain proofs we'll never be able to prove. It didn't stop mathematical progress. People just kind of said, okay, that's really cool that you have this impossibility result. The field of mathematics moved on. So if that was the only concern, I would have no concerns. It's just a specific case for a dead-end approach, which I tried to explain to people who may disagree and say that it might still work. It may not work for most crowds, more theoretical than applied.
Cool. So yeah, so if we accept your impossibility results, how should we respond to that? Like, so I'm guessing maybe you think we should give up on alignment and we should focus more on like governance or figure out how to like box AIs. Like, what's your response?
So it's a good idea to not just trust me or the papers I published, even if they are peer reviewed. Please read them, find bugs in them, report the bugs. I'll be so happy to be proven wrong, under the assumption that I'm right. If it is impossible to control, make safe, smarter than human systems, it seems like it's a bad idea to build them. If you can't win, don't play the game. We have very capable systems right now. We can easily use them for the next 50 years to scale economy to benefit greatly. At that level, we are still getting all the difficult problems solved. We saw protein folding problems solved, so it can help us with life extension. But the moment you get beyond human capability, I think we're taking a huge gamble, and I don't think you can undo that. And the reason I published those papers is to allow people to exercise their self-interest. If you think it's gonna harm you, rich, young billionaire about to train the next model, maybe that will be give you a reason to not do that. I don't think making a law, making it illegal will succeed as much.
Yeah, so do you think it is possible to prevent us from building those systems?
Not in standard environment. I mean, something really bad would have to happen for it to not go on as it is right now.
Fair enough, fair enough. Should we make AIs artificially stupid, and if so, how?
So we had a paper on artificial stupidity, and all it is, we wanted to kind of do like a data set of standard human limits. You can remember 7 plus minus 2 units. This is the speed with which you can calculate. And for commercial products, for consumer products, use those as kind of built-in limits for systems, so they at least don't outperform you in communication and interaction. Just kind of make user-friendly toasters. Your toaster doesn't have to be smarter than you.
Okay. And so you think we should use those kind of limits, like limit it to being like human-like capabilities in multiple ways, like you're going
So there was a lot of proposals for what is useful. I don't think that's a solution to anything. I mean, the moment you have this coded limit, somebody will just remove it and you're done with it. But again, lots of proposals. I'm happy to see people trying things, suggesting things. Maybe something will stick.
Cool. How might we box an AI? This seems to be a topic that you've written about as well.
That's another impossibility results. You cannot indefinitely contain a super intelligent system. If it's dumber than you, yes, absolutely, you can get, GPT-3 to stay where it is. But I think the moment the system is smarter, it can bribe you, blackmail you, just straight up find loopholes in the security protocols. So I don't think it's a permanent solution. It can buy you some time, but I would not rely on such a method.
So what's the specific impossibility result there, or do you have multiple results recording relevant to boxing an AI?
So the result is that you cannot keep it in the box. That's the impossibility. You can kind of keep it there for a little while, but eventually it will find a way to escape. As long as you are in some way interacting with it, observing it, information is already leaking out of a box, and then it's a question of outsmarting you using that channel.
And we can't just reset it?
Reset it?
Yeah, reset it.
It may be smart enough to keep temporary memory somewhere, file structure, interactions, logs, depending on your architecture used. But again, anything you try, you're basically saying, I can outsmart a much, much smarter system indefinitely. And there is not so far a reason I found for thinking that will hold.
Okay. Is there a specific way that you're most kind of worried about the AI kind of like escaping, like for example, social manipulation, some kind of side channel, or so, just worried about everything in general?
I started this work like a decade ago, and back then it seemed pretty obvious. But this is how we're going to do research, which is going to not release those things on the internet. That was a mistake. It was completely flawed assumption. First thing we did is connect it to the internet, give it plugins. So at this point, again, it's a completely irrelevant argument. I don't think it's worth spending time on it. It's not boxed. It's fully open source now.
Okay. On a different tact, what is intellectuology?
That's a cute name for kind of intersection of a lot of fields, which all look at brains and minds and agents and giving them common tools. So people in computer science, in AI, trying to create minds. In psychology, they may develop IQ tests to measure intelligence in animals and humans. And there is a lot of other disciplines where they have interest in basically intellect. How do you create it, control it, measure it, detect it, all sorts of things. So that's kind of like an umbrella term for bringing those together and making sharing of information a little easier. I don't think it took off based on number of citations to that paper, but yeah, I tried.
Fair enough. I guess, the component of that, which everyone here would be familiar with, would be the orthogonality thesis. Is there relevance to alignment there beyond the orthogonality thesis?
I'm not so sure I fully understand the question.
Oh, I guess I'm like, is intellectuology, is this related to alignment in some way, or is that more something you thought was kind of like interesting to kind of explore?
Okay, so anything with minds. So orthogonality thesis, can there be a mind with set of goals, disproportionate to its capability and so on? Yeah, all of that would fall under studying of possible minds, space of minds, complexity, sizes, consciousness becomes part of it if you really dig deep into that area.
Cool. So, okay, so it sounds like you do think the orthogonality thesis is part of it. And do you see an intersection with alignment beyond the orthogonality thesis? Do you see other areas?
Other areas which fall into this field of intellectuology?
Yeah. Like if it had become a field, which unfortunately sounds like it hadn't, but if it had, do you think there would have been like other intersections with alignment?
I think it's all about essentially properties of minds, controlling them. Right now, we don't even know if a system is aligned or not. Is it safe or not? We have no way of telling if it's about to undergo some sort of a treacherous turn or not. So again, as long as it's studying properties of brains, minds, intelligent agents, all of it, I think is exactly what I had in mind. I think at the end of that paper, I have kind of a list of things a scholar in that discipline would be interested in. And I think a lot of those terms may not exist back then, but the concepts are the same. Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, we're getting towards the ends of the questions I'm asking, and so we'll get on to your questions. So I can see that's people have already submitted 2 questions, but feel free to, jump on the link and wait. I'll just paste the link in one more time, just because I don't know if Sarush would have, seen it. So that's the link there. Questions. Okay, so I guess maybe the last question that I'm going to ask, which out of my questions, is like, what was it for you once you started to realize there were these like impossibility results? Like, what was the experience of that?
So it was interesting. I always found those interesting in physics and mathematics, but I kind of thought that once they're published, people would be kind of concerned about them or engage with them. That was not the case. I think they pretty much ignored most of them. They accumulated some citations, but nothing like you would expect if they were truly taken seriously.
Okay. Yeah, well, I suppose, we're glad to have you here, and so that, to, give people a bit more exposure to this. Okay, so let's look at the questions. All right, the first one I'll do is from Jordan. Where do you disagree most with, for example, with Eliezer Yudikowsky?
It's a good question. So this is kind of surprising, but Eliezer is actually an optimist. He thinks the problem is solvable, right? He thinks we don't have enough time, resources, brains, but he thinks in principle we can do it, whereas I disagree with him on that. So he's a bright-eyed optimist in my book.
Wow, okay, that's hilarious. You are the first person I've met who's ever called Eliezer an optimist. Um, okay, Rupert, why don't you explain your question that you've or read out your question that you've written in the chat.
Oh yeah, thanks, Chris. Roman, I was just wondering, like, with the example you give of an instruction of the form disobey this instruction, it just struck me that's a little bit different to the case of the Gödel sentence. because the Gödel sentence asserts of itself its own unprovability, but it still has a truth value. But for an instruction of the form disobey this instruction, there would actually be no well-defined criterion for whether the system had actually ended up obeying the instruction or not. So it's a little bit more like the liar paradox sentence. And basically, I was just curious, like, are you actually proving a theorem where you're using some kind of fancy diagonal construction to construct an instruction of the form disobey this instruction? Or is it just a sort of informal argument? If you could just clarify that a bit more.
I think it's not formal in the sense of symbols. I leave those for AIs, and I try to use more like philosophical jargon with humans. But basically, you have two outcomes. The system will either start disobeying you or keep obeying you. In both cases, it's not following your orders, direct orders. Again, if you feel that this is kind of weak and not that interesting, it's fine. But there is many other ways to show that direct orders will lead you into very unsafe situations. For example, malevolent use. I can order a system to kill everyone, right? That's a direct order, and system would not disobey it in that it is direct control.
Cool. So next question. With delegated control, maybe a sufficiently smart AI will know enough psychology to make us happy with how we are being controlled. Any thoughts on that?
It sounds like some sort of abuse where like you have this guy in your basement and you're giving him just the right drugs where he's not trying to escape. I mean, again, you can come up with those scenarios, but do we have consent from 8 billion people to be in that state?
Yeah, that does sound a bit yeah, grim. Okay, next one. What about super intelligent AI that doesn't act agentically and instead is used to answer questions or make predictions?
Right. So kind of Oracle AI systems have been discussed. A few problems there. Oracles can be used again for malevolent purposes, develop biological weapon, find a way to take over the world. Also, as we noticed, if you just had a system which all it had to do was predict the next token, somehow as a byproduct of it, it started creating models. It needs more and more compute to make those predictions better. So in some way, it's already an agent. And if you just slap a loop around it, now it's a full-blown agent trying to accomplish goals and using its Oracle powers to get there. So I think it's not giving us the level of safety people hoped it would.
Okay. Okay, another question. With the different types of control, direct, implicit, aligned, delegated, is there a proof that there isn't a type that we haven't considered?
I don't think there is proof showing that all the possible considerations have been taken care of, but this is more of a spectrum, right? So either we are in control, the system is in control, or it's some degree of mixed power sharing. So I think I just saw it as that. I didn't explicitly look at every conceivable permutation. And again, if somebody was to say, okay, you didn't consider this option, here's my proposal, it's absolutely going to scale, I would be very happy about it. But so far, no one came and said, we found a bug, this is why you're completely wrong, this is why it's totally possible to align, this is the set of values we are talking about, this is how we get 8 billion people to agree on it, plus the squirrels, whatever it is, not happening so far.
Cool. So we have another question from Jordan. What is the epistemic status of your impossibility results? For example, what probability do you place on the existence of loopholes or different formalizations avoiding impossibility?
So I think it's very high that there are ways to work around specific problems. Like you have this toolbox. If hammer is not available, you can use something else to bring the nail in. Overall, we just, as I said, published this paper in ACM Computing Results survey. It's a pretty good journal. So it seems like there is kind of at least a few reviewers agreed that it was a real deal. but it's more like, the way I see it, it's a problem, and it's a fractal problem. The more I zoom in, the more difficulties and problems we uncover. I never see a paper which says we completely solved this issue and we can move on. We see that then we try it this way, we discover 10 new problems. Oh, you're doing this, now there is inner alignment problem. Oh, you zoom in some more, now there is power. See, like it seems like the whole field is a research area about mapping the space of problems, but there is not an equivalent progress in domain of solutions.
Yeah. So you said you have not necessarily gotten that much engagement from the alignment community. Like, what has it been like when you have talked to people in the community? Like, what's their standard kind of responses? Is it more along the lines of people go, oh, this is more like, it feels more like an edge case. I think I can work around it. I don't think it applies to what I'm doing. Or like, what do people generally say?
It is actually interesting. So they're kind of like a double hump distribution where people either go, well, obviously it's true. Everyone knows you can't have perfect security. What's novel about this? And then they completely ignore consequences of building a system which is not safe. Or it's kind of the opposite. They go, like, for example, with Eliezer, I shared my paper and he says, well, intuitively, I know you're wrong. Of course, it's possible. I just don't know how to prove it.
Oh, okay. That is interesting. So yeah, what is the mistake of people who make the first argument, who say that this is all trivial, everyone knows this?
So I think there is a big difference between standard cybersecurity and artificial intelligence safety or super intelligence safety. In cybersecurity, if you mess up, it's fine. Users already clicked, I agree, so they can't sue you. You give them new credit cards, reset passwords, and you move on with your life. With superintelligence, a lot of people think you only get one chance to get it right. So if there is an equivalent level of mistakes, you're done. Even if you make it safer, you put on a lot more resources to where it's not failing once in a million, but once in a billion. If that system makes 1 billion decisions a minute, after a few minutes, you're still done.
Yeah, that's not too positive. All right. So I guess we've gone through the questions in the Slido and the chat. Feel free to just like I don't know, raise your hand now if you have questions. Or if people don't have questions, I might toss a few more questions in myself. Anyone want to ask more questions? All right. If you were wrong, what's the most likely way you think you'd be wrong?
So I have a paper and then another paper, 2 large surveys of AI risk skepticism, if you're interested. And in there, I'm trying to look at all the arguments people made why it's not even a problem. It's not our problem. Here's how it's going to be easy. And honestly, after reading 300-400 papers, all saying something skeptical, I have not found one which was like, but this one is really changing my mind. It is a lot of cognitive bias, errors, self-interest, ignoring the problem. And again, I'm very happy to have someone go, okay, this argument against AI risk skepticism really changes minds. Read it, and like all the AI safety people read it and go, yeah, it's going to help. But so far, after I think reading as much literature on it as possible, I haven't found anything external. And internally, I mean, at this point, 10 papers in, if I found something to kind of counteract that, I'd probably concentrate on that a lot more. But I haven't. If you have a good suggestion, I would love it, absolutely.
Rupert has a question. What's your probability for the accidental flume scenario?
So what does that mean, accidental versus guaranteed and given as soon as we train the next model? What does that accidental part imply?
Yeah, Rupert?
I think what I had in mind is if it happens suddenly without warning, like, for example, suppose
Okay.
two GPT models over the next 10 years, or, yeah.
I understand this. So my view of it is GPT-4 in many ways was stopped in its training exactly at like 98th, 99th percentile of many tests, law exam, medical exam, all sorts of GRE tests. So let's say it was right about to cross this human capability level. Now we take and start training GPT-5 for the next 6 months. Same as before, we just kind of wait. In order to see how good it is, you have to stop the training and test it for a while. It's not obvious at what capability level it is. If we're already at near a human level, that means like a month into that training run, we cross the human level. After 2 months, it's super intelligent. By the time you stop training at 6 months and just start testing it, you already have a problem. You don't need self-improvement. You don't need FOOM. Out of the box, you have misaligned super intelligence.
Yeah, cool. So yeah, did you have a probability on that or not really?
If we train a model which is supposed to be more capable, if the goal is to get to AGI in the next run, again, unless something stops this from happening, it's pretty high. I don't have specific number, but again, just the question is kind of like, what's the probability that there is going to be a next model? Is it Gemini in December? Is it GPT-4 next year? But pretty high.
Yeah, that makes sense. Seems to vary quite a bit. Okay, we have a question from Sarush. So what would be your recommendation to the world on how we should move forward, given your perspective on the challenge of alignment?
Well, again, if we take certain assumptions as true, so if you think super intelligent systems could be dangerous, if you assume that you cannot control them, or at least right now we have no idea how to do it, then building one seems like a really, really bad idea, and no one should do it because it's bad for them. So we should stop creating more intelligent than human models right away. It doesn't guarantee anything, but it's a step in the right direction. Give us more time to figure out what can be done.
EJ, you had a question.
Just regarding the GPT-5 example that you're talking about, if GPT-4 is like slightly subhuman intelligence and then you train further until it's above human intelligence, if it's only slightly above human intelligence, I'm not sure how much of a risk that is compared to something that's millions of times higher than human intelligence, because I guess in our world as it is, then the smartest humans aren't necessarily in control of the world. And so I'm not necessarily sure that GPT-5 being like slightly smarter than the smartest human is going to be like our end.
So it may not be an immediate end of the world, but think about what that would do to like cybersecurity, internet economics. You have a million super smart hackers just trying to find a loophole in everything. Social engineering attacks, deep fakes, all of that fully automated. That would destroy economy pretty quickly, just that alone. So we may still be around, but maybe in a much crappier state.
Cool. Have you managed to persuade anyone in the alignment community that you're correct? Like who would be the most prominent people?
I'm not sure about prominent people. There are some people who arrived at same conclusions independently and doing work in the same direction, but using different methods and tools. I know personally of 3 or 4 who mostly do impossibility results. I think there is some funding available and there was some grants to look at that. I don't think there is any good examples with like big names in safety community. I did manage to change mind of a politician who started from I saw Terminator, this is goofy, to like now I'm going to testify in front of Kentucky senators telling them what to do. So I'll take it as a win. No one ever changes their mind anyway, so that was impressive.
Yeah, I mean, I think I saw that Reynolds, who runs AI safety camp, that he was kind of persuaded of your kind of perspective. I don't know. Could you say a few words about some of the work that some of the other people are doing on impossibility results?
So I'm horrible with names. I would have to like Google and not butcher them. But I think he's working with a colleague who's like the main writer for that project. I'm not even going to try to remember his name. I think he's an independent scholar, so I can't cite a university. There is a few, again, if you look at the paper itself, right, the uncontrollability paper, I think it has over 100 citations. Some of those are to papers which claim either partial or kind of competing limitations in results. Some of them you can see as impossibility results, not as broad as what I'm implying, but for different, again, smaller tools you'll need to make this happen.
Cool. So, Rupert, is it a consequence of your views that as a mathematician with some interest in AI safety research, my mathematical ability gives me no special edge in helping to fix things?
Oh, no, like, as I said, it doesn't mean you should stop. So first, you can always make safer systems. You may not make them safe, but it's still better if we have an extra month. On top of it, if you might think that I'm right, it would be great to have independent confirmation. Somebody else publishes, results collaborating what I'm seeing. And at a certain point, the kind of mainstream shifts. I was at a conference, Berkeley was organizing a workshop on AI safety. And I think there was slides from Anthropic. And basically they have a distribution landscape of possible futures, and they're like, okay, I'm making up numbers, but just to give you an idea, there's like 50% chance we'll make it aligned, 30% chance like it's going to be too difficult, too hard, and like 15% chance or whatever, it's impossible. So that's like a slide from the major player, major AI lab in this space saying, yeah, there is a non-zero chance that it's a dead end. And more when you listen to people, they kind of say things like, yeah, it could be impossible. We can't afford it. We must find a way. Like, I think Mustafa Salman just had an interview come out. I haven't heard it, but I saw the preview. And basically he says, like, we must figure it out. We cannot have it be impossible. And that's not a very reassuring situation to be in, where like you have to create perpetual motion machine or you're screwed.
Evan, what's your question?
Yeah, so I'm struggling to phrase it well, but I'll go with what I have. So like in the impossibility results paper, you're like defining safety as involving adversarial robustness, right? And I think some might claim that this is not like quite right, or like not exactly necessary, in the sense that like there are environments in which if I was exposed to this environment would cause my values to drift undesirably. For example, like if I took heroin or something, like I can predict that like the training process in my brain would cause me to like update my values in a way that I don't desire. But like I, as a trained artifact distinct from that training process, can like turn my intelligence towards avoiding this sort of thing, right? Because I don't just like want to solely like maximize reward according to my training process or something like that. And also because this like intelligence means that I'm not ergodic or anything. Like I don't have to like end up in a situation where I take heroin. So like I feel like we don't exactly need adversarial robustness in the artifact. Do you get what I'm saying?
I'm not sure, but I'll try. So there was an example from Eliezer a while ago about Gandhi, and Gandhi would never take a pill, which would make him kill people. I think it's awesome if a pill is labeled, this pill will make you kill people. In the real world, you have no idea what the impact of future learning will do. If I pick up a book, I haven't read the book, but if I read this book, it will change me in certain ways. Until I go through the process of experiencing this environment, this book, this interaction with other agents, I cannot predict ahead of time how I will change. Some people were religious, they read a book, now they're atheists. Not what the parents, the family hoped for, but now they completely misaligned from the community. Is this close to what you're looking for?
Yeah, I guess it's like is that just like a human, like, is that a flaw in human reasoning, or like, in the limit of like arbitrarily intelligent
I
systems?
think
Like
any
maybe.
learning process, until you actually complete the learning process, you cannot predict where it's going to take you. That's the unpredictability
Yes.
paper. I cannot predict what a more capable system interacting with its training data will end up with.
Yeah, I guess there's no guarantee that there's some sort of like
And
smooth
it could be very
convergence or
gradual.
something.
It doesn't have to be like you immediately just flip, but like slowly you have this behavioral drift where you're like, humans, they're not that special, screw them.
Yeah, I suppose so. I'll have to think more about this.
That's interesting. Yeah, so like how long were you doing alignment before you started, focusing more on these impossibility results? And like were you more optimistic about, say, any particular techniques before you kind of cottoned onto this path?
So I started a long time ago. Back then, we knew a lot less. We had no practical models to play with at the same level. So yeah, I thought boxing was like a genius idea. We can just, keep it securely contained and experiment with it and get oracle-like behaviors out of it. That was exactly why I started writing that paper. I was proposing specific levels of containment, protocols for interaction to reduce chances of information smuggling. The hope was not to show that it's impossible, but to get it done.
Okay, and so you're most optimistic about boxing, which I guess you still seem to have some. I don't know, like you're not optimistic about it at all.
I'm realistic about our chances here. It doesn't look good. Basically what we hear from top labs, we have 2 years until AGI, and we need 4 years to align superintelligence. That's just what the headlines are, right? So just knowing those facts, you should not be too optimistic, right?
Okay, that's a bit grim, to be honest. Okay, with the with the boxing, it feels like at least interesting to me. Like this was something that seemed to receive a lot of discussion back in the day. I've not seen that much discussion on it recently. I mean, I did see a post from like Peter Park, but I don't know. Like, do you have any thoughts on why boxing seems to have been receiving a lot less attention these days? Is it because, like, as you say, they're just connecting all the AIs to the internet, or is it that?
That's exactly that. There is just waiver leak models, so open source models, so give you API access. It doesn't make any sense to, at this point, talk about how to keep them not on the internet.
Yeah. That's challenging. All right.
And even if it was, again, think about it. This is $1 trillion in economic benefit, at least, maybe 100 trillion, right? Like you can blackmail people, bribe people, whoever works with that system will be disclosing it immediately.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess it is less likely now that it looks like it's going to be built by a big corporation than versus when before in the days it was like, oh, maybe Miri can build something or something like that.
And governments too. It's a military tool, so you have state level adversaries trying to get access to the model. It's unlikely to be kept private for a long time.
Yeah. So yeah, we're getting towards the end of the hour. Does anyone have any last questions they want to ask for Roman?
I guess maybe it's not a great one, but assuming you could solve inner alignment, does an outer aligned goal of I don't know, preserving humanity's option value, just trying not to intervene too much apart from to, save us from other existential risks. Does that seem compatible with your results?
So any type of minimizing impact is a step in the right direction. I suspect that this prevent all other existential risks may backfire. So if you're trying to stop climate change and humans are causing climate change, maybe you need to do something with humans, and that's where it starts creating problems, right? So it's not obvious how far you have to go to mitigate those risks. Humans cause wars, viruses, develop biological weapons. So what state do you keep humans in to prevent all those things? Are you locked up in a box? Maybe.
Okay, yeah, that was very interesting. Last shot, anyone? All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming today. I appreciate you waking up at 8 a.m. I was kind of worried that it was just going to be me and Roman today because of the scheduling, but so thank you so much for, getting up. And Roman, thank you so much for coming along and answering all of our questions. It was like an absolute pleasure talking to you.
My pleasure. I'm sorry our clocks are misaligned so much. Alignment is a hard problem, as you can see. We did the best we can, but at the end, no one's really happy. It's my night, it's your morning. So we did what we can. If you found something interesting, if you read one of those surveys and feel like you want to work on it, email me. I'm always happy to collaborate.
Okay, cool.
Thank you very much, Roman. I appreciate it.
Thank you.